In a matter of weeks, the government is planning to price fix debit card swipe fees below the cost of doing business. They're going to price fix debit card swipe fees below the cost of doing business. On the surface, this plan might make sense. But peel back the layers, and you'll see why there's a whole bunch of folks out there on both sides of the aisle that are raising a flag. Now, I'm not asking to repeal the rules or even change them. I'm asking that we take a closer look so that we can get the information to understand the impacts, both intended and unintended. You know, I've listened to the feedback my colleagues have shared on this issue. I've heard their concerns. And while it is important to stop and examine the impact of limiting debit card swipe fees, some have said that 2 years is simply too long. I'm willing to adjust my legislation to address those concerns. So Senator Corker and I have decided to shorten the time frame from 24 months to 15 months. Now, here's how the 15 months are going to be used. 15 months will provide the agencies with 6 months for a study, and they will provide the Federal Reserve 6 months to rewrite the rules using that study. And it will allow 3 months to implement the final rules. 15 months is the bare minimum to get this study right, and we want to get it right. For me, stopping and studying the unintended consequences of government price fixing has everything to do with access to capital for small businesses and consumers in rural America. Make no mistake, the big banks are going to do fine no matter what. That's why I oppose to bailing them out. But, Madam President, all of Montana is rural. And all but 2 banks in my entire state are considered small community banks and will be affected by this debit interchange price fixing rule. All of Montana's credit unions will be affected as well. They will feel the pinch, and they will lose because the government is going to set a price for doing business that doesn't cover their costs. Let me say it again. The federal government is going to tell these folks what price to set on interchange rates, and it will not be enough for the little guys to be able to compete in the marketplace. Let me ask this. How would a big box retailer react if we set the price of T-shirts? If we set the price of T-shirts, what it costs to make, ship, and market them, you can bet the retailers would be up in arms, and rightfully so, about the government setting prices and telling them how to run their business. Some have suggested that the only way to have a competitive marketplace is by capping rates. That kind of reason doesn't make sense to a farmer like me. When you slant the playing field against small banks, they can't compete with the big guys. And if they go under, the business and consumers that rely on them are left hanging. That, Madam President, is why a populist farmer from rural America is on the side of common sense in this debate, and I'm on the side of Montana small businesses and consumers. Last Thursday, I asked Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke about the impact of government price fixing as it applies to rural America. He's not only the major regulator who has raised serious questions about whether the supposed exemption will work for small banks. He's not the only one. Last week, Chairman Bernanke said, quote, it could result in some smaller banks being less profitable and even failing. Let me repeat that. In the words of Chairman Bernanke, the small banks in Montana and across America could fail under this planned rule. And what does it mean if small banks fail? It means more consolidation in the banking industry. Now, how in the world is that good for consumers? How is it better for a small business in Glendive, Montana, to have to ask the bank headquartered on Wall Street for a loan instead of going to the bank on Main Street? Are big banks going to provide the same level of service as community banks? I think not. Will they be able to evaluate the prospects of small businesses by only looking at data without understanding the communities that they serve? While big banks create strong relationships with people in rural America, will they do that? How about those folks who are looking to start a small business? We know that credit unions are one of the few financial institutions to ever consider going into Indian country to help bring investment to some of the most impoverished areas in this country. Do you think that if these small folks go under, there will be anyone else willing to lend on reservations? No way. No way. During last week's hearing, FDIC Chairwoman Sheila Bair said that this new rule is, quote, going to reduce revenues at a number of smaller banks, and they will have to pass that on to their customers in terms of higher fees. Rural America, especially in this fragile economy cannot afford that, Madam President. Today, I want to share a few businesses in Montana that are opposed to this government price fixing. Their stories are not uncommon. They're quite ordinary. Heard from a woman by the name of Doris Rochelot. She runs Doris's Daycare in Great Falls, Montana. She's been doing business for nearly 30 years with a community bank. She tells me that she's struggling to make ends meet, as many small businesses are, and paying more in monthly checking would hurt her very, very much. Also in Great Falls, there's a small business owner named Mark Voiles. Mark owns Why Not Trucking. His reasons for supporting my amendment to stop and study the government limit is because, and I quote, doesn't want to pay more fees of his money in his bank. Cabela's a large retailer, a popular sporting goods store in Billings, Montana. Cabela's is worried of the Durbin Amendment because they offer their customers a rewards credit card. They have real concerns with government price controls and what they will mean for their ability to meet the needs of their customers. Bottom line is this: allowing the government to price fix debit card swipe fees is a slippery slope. Maybe that's why my amendment is to stop and study the impacts of this proposed rule. It has broad bipartisan support from folks like the National Education Association or Americans for Tax Reform, different sides of the economic equation. And then there are nonprofit organizations like Rural Dynamics in Montana. Rural Dynamics serves the entire state of Montana, thousands of folks every year. Their mission: to help individual people and families achieve economic independence, to make sure that folks can earn and keep and grow their assets to reach economic independence. Rural Dynamics is a well-respected organization. Many of their strategies involve helping Montanans manage their assets and save for their future, enabling them access to banking services, and anything that would result in undue higher fees would take their mission backwards. Rural Dynamics says simply, we want to understand the long-term risk associated with limiting debit card swipe fees, how it will impact rural America, how it will affect economic independence. Just as convincing as small businesses in my state are the administration experts who have been tasked with trying to make this rule on debit interchange work. Chairman Bernanke just last week said he's still not sure whether the small issuer exemption would work, saying, I quote, there are market forces that would work against this exemption. Sheila Bair, chairwoman of the FDIC, raised similar concerns about the workability of the small issuer exemption. So has Chairwoman Debbie Matz of the National Credit Union Administration. So has the Conference of State Banking Supervisors. So has the National Association of State Credit Union Supervisors. This represents all of the regulators of the small financial institutions at the state and national level. Every one of them. These are the folks that are tasked with keeping our community banks and credit unions vibrant and strong, ensuring these institutions are well capitalized and making sound loans. And all of them, let me say again, all of them have raised concerns about the impact of this rule on small financial institutions that they supervise. These regulators are not convinced that these rules are going to be able to work in the way that they were intended. My friends on the other side of this debate continue to attack these folks. They've said they're shills for the big banks and they don't understand market forces and they don't understand small institutions. This couldn't be further from the truth. And no one has been able to explain to me why studying this issue to make sure that these these rules do what they say they're supposed to do is a bad idea. To stop, to study, that's what the bipartisan bill that I'm sponsoring does, Madam President. To stop and study the unintended consequences for rural America and this country as a whole. If this rule goes into effect, the consumers and businesses who rely on community banks and credit unions, oh yeah, they're going to pay the price. And we can bet that many retailers won't be eager to pass a few pennies they save down to you. Yet Doris Rochelot's banking fees will go up. Mark Voiles will have to pay more to keep his money in his bank. The folks at Cabela's will be asking what's next, and will it hurt their loyal customers? And thousands of Montanans who rely on Rural Dynamics will have more hurdles to jump over to reach economic independence. Madam President, these stories hit home. They're the stories I tell when someone asks, why would a populist farmer be against the government telling the small banks that drive our economy how to do business? I'm not asking to repeal this provision, far from it, Madam President. I'm asking us to do our homework in this body, to make sure we understand exactly what it means for Montana and all of America.